Theme song for the Gear Podcast. That wasn't just for you, James, but we'll talk about that in a second. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's episode number 22 of the Gear Podcast. My name is Troy.
My name is Leon Todd, and today we have the legendary, the mythical Mr. James Lugo on the podcast. How are you, James?
I was turning around like, where is he? Sounds awesome.
How's your day been, mate? Where are you calling in from?
Nashville. And so it's 10 p.m. Well, 10:08. Here in Nashville, I'm in my studio and hanging out with my Australian buddies.
Wait, where are they? Hang on. Cool. Well,
I'm already liking where this is going. We're all surrounded by amps and gear, which is very important because this is the Gear Podcast after all. So
this is a good one.
Yep. Yeah. And we're just commenting before we got the same amp racks as well, I think. So it's perfect. It's a match made in heaven, really. So sorry, Leon, I cut you off, mate.
Oh, I was just going to say, for James, for anybody listening in who may not be aware of who you are and what you do you want to give us the 5-minute rundown of, I guess, the James Lugo story, Reader's Digest version for us?
Well, I'm James Lugo, and I'm musician, singer, songwriter, producer, mixer, and I don't know, I left home when I was a kid and moved to Hollywood in the 80s and, did that. And in 2011, we moved here to Nashville. And, it's been, it's the music business. So it's been the best of times and the worst of times. It's been
the blurst of times.
Though. Yeah, it's been good. But, hey, we've had some fun though, for sure. And things are good right now. I'm doing, I'm working a lot. I travel a lot. I'm a voice coach. I was a voice coach for years on American Idol and Glee, and I work with Disney. I do a lot of kids and pop, and so still doing that. But I'm really a rock guy that's like transitioned into a few other things. So
isn't that pretty much what happens?
We're
all rock guys, right? You have to. Sorry.
Yeah, in 1991, I was living in Hollywood. Hollywood had hair out to here, eyeliner, spandex, and then Nirvana hit, and it was like, man, we couldn't have been less cool. So it was, you had to, it was like either you evolved or you devolved. I like
what was that?
Yeah, Leon's evolved into a cat all of a sudden.
It's an episode of Animals.
Why does that cat only have one eye? Yeah, I got one of my dad's jokes in on it.
This is going great already. So I want to intercede straight away there before Troy and I totally fanboy out. What was that like transition like? Because I've spoken to a few people who have said it was like a pivotal moment in their lives where either everything that was good went to absolute garbage, or they were like, finally, I can play some music that I like and I don't have to, go to the clown show every single day. Or was it just like, hey, I like making music, I'm just going to roll with it?
Yeah, I'm really more of a musician than anything. So when I was a kid, and if you were a rocker, that was it. You were listening to Foghat and Leonard Skinner and Led Zeppelin, and like you didn't listen to anything else. But that was not me. I was very into Elton John and Earth, Wind and Fire and Stevie Wonder, and I was very into Gladys Knight and the Pips and disco and funk, and I don't know, I just was very into that. I danced a lot as a kid. I was into like dance music, but then I was like a metalhead, and I was into Iron Maiden and Motley Crue and Van Halen, and Rush was really my band when I was a kid. And
all right, you've officially achieved friend of the podcast status with that, because
the studio was called Hemispheres for like 20 years.
Wow.
So yeah, and I can play the F sharp chord with the open E and B, just in case you were wondering.
The big Al chord. That should actually be the chord accompanying the intro to the podcast.
You've commented a few times when you hit it on your videos, and you're like, the Alex Lifeson chord.
I always just say if I'm demoing any sort of modulation, I'm contractually obligated to play that chord.
And then you can go to the A2.
Yeah, exactly. Then and you just kind of move it around and do that for 17 minutes and you're prog. So that's, I mean, as someone who's a fan of music, it sounds like you just kind of follow wherever the music is. And have you found that that's, I mean, you're in Music City right now, Nashville, right? So you've been there for what you said, 2011?
No, eight years.
8 years.
I left. We left in 2011. We had a baby, and my wife was pregnant. We moved to North Carolina, and honestly, I kind of wanted out of the music. Not that I wanted out. I just didn't. I don't know. I was ready for a change, and then I moved there. And after a couple of years, I was like, oh man, I'm itching for something like, and I was like, well, I'm not moving to New York, and I'm not moving to LA. So it was only Nashville. And a lot of my friends have moved here. Like, I don't know if you guys know what's going on, but there's a mass exodus out of California, and most of the music people are moving to Nashville. So it's a cool, like I was out here in the 90s, and it was very country, and I remember I had a record deal out here as an artist, and they were billing it as I was gritty country, and they were they were saying, we wanted you to be a cross between Bon Jovi and Travis Tritt. And I'm writing songs about pickup trucks and being on the range and
so
whatever.
They wanted it to sound like Bon Jovi.
Kind of like Bon Jovi, right? With Brent Mason on guitar or something.
Okay, right.
But I came out here in 2015, and it was. I went down to the Strip, Broadway. And they're playing everything, man. Guns N' Roses and Metallica, and I walked in the club and they're playing All the Small Things, and the place was just banging.
Yep.
I was like, oh, this is cool, because when I was out here in the 90s, it was not like that. It was pure country.
I was there.
I
was there in 2012. I spent about a week there, just kind of doing tourist stuff, and I remember going to a bar. And the band transitioned from Long Train Running to Bulls on Parade, and and the place, as you say, it was just pumping. So every every bar or it's be bar, pub, whatever you walk into, it's you got the best musicians in the world playing literally any request, any genre of music. It's just kind of it's awesome. That feeling is awesome too. But it's nice to see that.
Well, yeah, I mean it's like the tour capital of the world. More touring musicians live here. So they tour a lot Wednesday through Saturday. So you can go to a place on a Monday night and Dolly Parton's piano player is sitting at the piano, just killing it. So it's cool though. The funny thing about it is, on the outside, it's the level of talent is mind blowing compared to Los Angeles. But the thing with Los Angeles is the people that are good are not playing bars and they're not playing gigs.
Right.
They're in the studio and they're in sessions and they're in rehearsals. So you would come here and think that oh, this is a whole other level, which it is in some ways, but there's no scene in California. There's no scene in LA for playing live anymore.
Yep.
It's over. It's long over. There's just a few bars left, but.
Yeah, my
here,
impression of LA was that it was like an open air museum. We've played at the Whiskey a few times, and you pay to play, you give the tickets away to your mates, and then while you walk out after your set, and a tour bus comes up, they stop for 45 seconds. Everyone takes a photo of the world famous Whiskey A Go Go, and then they move on to the next spot, and it's just the veneer is there that it's pumping, but it's not. There's no one's out playing. So have you done much playing since you've been in Nashville, getting out, or have you mostly been in the studio?
Well, I haven't. I got kids and I'm a little bit of a Mr. Mom. My wife manages a grocery store, so she's gone 50 hours a week, doing that deal. And then we have a house, and in the back is a separate building. That's this.
Right.
So, I'm today I taught early this morning, and then I had to take my son to the orthodontist, and then I come back, and then, we did this, and then I had to go make them lunch, and then, so I haven't played out, though I started to play out with a couple of churches, and it's been fun. Playing church music's been cool. I get to use my FM9.
Right, yeah, you can just go. And on that, like, is it really just all dotted eighth note delay and reverb?
I don't know. I mean, that's right. That's what it seems like. I mean, I don't know. I learn the songs and I basically have I have, in the words of Leon Todd, London plate. I can't say it like you, but I have London plate on there. And then I have a big reverb that I can add or take out. And then I just have a little bit of like analog chorus on all the time. And a little bit of, like you can go all quarter or dotted eighth. And I have like 3 amps. I only really use one, which is an AC30. Then I have a plexi once in a while I hit into. That's it. It's like, the thing with me too is, with the whole guitar rig, when I play live, it has to be simple because I'm singing.
Yep.
I'm not
Of course.
like I see these guys like just staring at their board. It's like, well, that's awesome, but that's not my switches have to be bam, like it's just bam, bam, bam. It can't be like.
It's exactly the same with me because I sing most of the gigs I play, and the most success I ever have playing is when there's one guitar sound and I just roll the volume back. Because
that's exactly it.
Yeah, anytime I've got to switch pedals on, which is hard because there are a few bands I play in that need a more variety of sound where I can't just get away with like a Crank's JCM 800. And that's a little tricky, trying to balance like the cleaner sounds with maybe some drives and some effects and whatnot. But man, if it's just me playing the songs that I like with the sound I like, 800, one sound, bam. And then for a solo, I just hit the one button that gives me a bit of delay. That's easy. Because it's hard, man. I don't know if you find this too, but the performing thing, like I can't read music or lyrics and actually perform. I can't like concentrate on anything else like below my waist level. Because the show suffers. And if you're there to be, performing, you kind of have to do that part. So yeah, the pedal board, it's fun. Like the pedals and all that sort of stuff, it's fun to play with, but it's not conducive to a good performance.
Yeah, I want to just very briefly lean into the singing thing because this is certainly how I became aware of you, James, which was through Troy and a friend of ours, friend of the podcast, Ben Wilson, which were your vocal tapes, and you were kind of one of the only guys putting stuff out at the time, which was like, here's how to sing rock and roll, and kind of like, if you're a man, here's how to sing like a man and be awesome at it. And did you have those, Troy, or was it Ben?
No, I bought them. I was saying to James before. I can't remember what it was called now. Was it? It would have come out like 2009, 2010. What was the? It was like a book.
Oh, was that Vocal Asylum?
Yeah, that was the one.
Or Vocal
It's on my. That's.
Was it through?
Sorry?
Was it Amazon or Groove 3?
Oh, it might have been Groove 3, actually. I don't remember. I think it's on my old iPad. That's where I was trying to find it, but I couldn't remember where I put it. But what I found really interesting about that, because I've gone on like various expeditions trying to raise my range, because I won't bore you with the whole story, but like I struggled for a really long time to just sing anything remotely above like an E, like a high, like open E on a guitar string. And all of the like the speech level singing and all that sort of stuff online, there's like resources for it. But it was funny because it was like not trying to sing in a way that I like, because I like rock music and I like rock singing, and it feels like that style is kind of, not that the exercises and the technique can't translate, but I just found like your tapes, it kind of felt a little bit more appropriate to what I liked. So I really liked it. I liked some of the exercises that were in it. It's been a little while since I've done it now. I should really drag it out and have a look. But I think
Thanks, man.
I think you did one, the old book on the belly. Is that right? You lay on the ground and you.
Yeah.
It's funny because I'm a recording engineer, producer as well, and I have a lot of singers coming through, and that's one when I have inexperienced singers, I just try and get them to try and focus on breathing and stuff. I always do that, to be like, hey man, I've done it. Like I'm in my studio right now, I can just picture the people coming through laying exactly where they lay and say, here you go, try this for a little bit and see how you go. So anyway, little pump you up there, but thank you for that. So
very influential in Perth, the old Lugo. And it's a thing, it's sort of like, oh yeah, do, that thing on that tape, which brings me to the other thing, which was pretty monumental for me and for Troy and for a lot of people. In my opinion, if we're talking about the sphere of rock music and rock guitar and the internet, I'm gonna say right now, you released the greatest YouTube video ever that will never be topped, which is the high gain amp shootout. Can you talk about that? Because I think that was the first time I'd really used the internet and seen it where it was like, I can't believe somebody has done this and taken the time, because you could only read about all these things like Soldano, Diesel, Bogner. You'd read forum posts about, oh no, this smashes this and that. And sort of the methodology that you use, I think, is kind of still the gold standard for like how to review an amp, which is you hear the amp with basically a reamped signal, and then you also hear it in a mix. So, you know, it's not just like, wow, how awesome is the bottom end on this thing? It's like, does it actually work in a rock song? And from memory, it was sort of like, you know, proper production as well, like double tracking, and there were vocals on the song. And do you want to talk about that whole process and how it came about and who you got involved in the process to rope up all those amps?
Yeah, that was, man. You know, it's funny. I didn't know YouTube was a thing then. I didn't parlay anything. I didn't know people subscribed. Like, I didn't know anything about it.
It wasn't
YouTube.
A thing, right? You just put stuff
I don't
up
think
that you
so.
liked.
I mean,
Was that 2010, 2011?
This was almost...
Sometime around there?
Oh, this was way before that, because my first ones were in Hollywood. That was 2005, 2004.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been like 20 years. Well, yeah, and I did 2 in Hollywood, and which were, you know, my studio was small, and we had like, I don't know, man, we had like 40, 50 people. Like people were like literally on the floor everywhere you looked. And, you know, I just had a bunch of friends come out and shredded, you know, it was cool though, you know, but yeah, we did multiple guitars, multiple guitarists, you know, so that you could hear like what he sounds like with a Tele, that guy sounds like with a Les Paul or whatever. And then it was the same combination of people on every amp across the board. The first one was mostly, I mean, my 2 main guys that helped me with it were Dave Friedman and Reinhold Bogner.
Say no more.
And yeah, and they were both there, and I mean, I was good friends with Dave, and I knew more of Reinhold, and then we became friends, and I did a lot of demos for him. It's funny thing is, like, I'm not like, you know, I see some of these guys on the YouTube and the way they play is, it's like, wow. But Reinhold loved my playing. He said, I love the way you have this like swampy, funky thing that I like. And I did demos for him with like the Goldfinger and with some ecstasies and stuff. But that was the first one, was in Hollywood. And I think we did about 35 or 40 amps, and you know, Dave's shop was at Hollywood Rehearsal. It was like a storage place and a rehearsal place, but like tour support. Hollywood Sound, I think, is what it was called. So he had access to all, like, you know, Jose's. We had an Atomica there. We had like all the original stuff, and I mean, we had George Lynch's Snakeskin. At one of them we had, or I don't know, I recorded Eddie's one, they called it Van Halen 1, his 68 Plexi. Dave had it in his shop. I got a picture actually of me playing it and my son sitting on it. Yeah, he's like about 6 months old, but that was the first one. And yeah, I don't think anybody was doing that. And I was like on Rig Talk, and then I went from mental. Then I went mental, and this I don't think will ever be topped. I did a pickup shootout. 23 pickups in my black Les Paul in one day. Installed, tracked, pulled, install, track. I still to this day have people always call me. They're like, "Hey man, do you have those tracks from the pickup shootout?" And I do. I have I don't throw nothing out. Mm-hmm. But then we did the pickup shootout, and then that was mental. And the guy, I found out through a friend, and I found this guy, and when it was all over, because we did a whole day preparation where clipped all the pickups, and he put the little clips on them so he could just clip it in. And then he was doing a thing where he'd put the capo on the neck, and then he just released this and then that. I mean, it was still a major project.
Still a process.
And when it was over, I was like, that's awesome. We should do it again. He's like, man, don't ever call me. I hated this. I'm like, really? Everybody else had a good time. And then I left, the building that I was in Hollywood, they were going to turn it into a hotel, and they were basically not giving any of us renewed leases. And we had a sign that we had 180 days at any given moment to have to leave the premises. Mm-hmm. So, I ended up leaving Hollywood, and I got a massive 3,000 square foot studio in North Hollywood. That's when I bought the SSL and the whole madness. Yep. And then we did it again. And we had 88 amps. Oh. And that one, everyone was at. Dave Friedman was there. Reinhold Bogner was there. Mark Cameron was there. That was when Delaney Nova, Third Power, he wasn't even anybody yet.
Yeah, okay.
They were nothing. He came in. He showed up with this amp. It was like a generic head shell, and he's like, "Yeah, I wired this. I made this plexi. I want you to see." And I played it, and I loved it. And I was like, "Wow, this is really cool." So at the end of the day, after everybody pretty much had left, it was me, him, Dave, and Reinhold, and I was playing it, and they were like. We were kind of critiquing it in a sense of like, this is cool, maybe try that. And he ended up becoming Third Power, which I think I'm going over there this week to work with him on some stuff. But yeah, that was it.
That's
and
amazing.
We did 88 amps. That was just crazy. And I had a dual Racto. Killed everybody. I remember. It killed everybody. It killed everybody dead, man. Every modded Marshall. I mean, we had George Lynch's Soldano. Like, I don't think anything. To this day, people are like, dude, that Racto was crazy.
Mm-hmm. Man, I remember watching that video so much, and like everybody here who likes that kind of thing, it got sent. It did the rounds, like you'd send it to somebody. Oh, you got to check this out, and check out this clip. And again, it's before influencer marketing was a thing. It was just like, here's this fun thing with, I don't know, this crazy guy in LA. He's doing this thing, and can you believe that they've got all these amps? And we sort of did a similar thing in Perth where it was like an amp day meetup inspired by that. Like, hey, if your mate's got some sweet stuff, bring it around. And we didn't record anything, but it was like, I think we down did at the main studio.
Oh no, we did.
Was doing some work out of.
Yeah, because we did too. So yeah, It was like directly inspired by yours, and this would have been probably about 2010, 2011. And there was a forum, because I didn't say, but to like on the pod, but like obviously I'm aware of you from Gears Bass, Gear Sluts. Is my camera gone? Oh, there it is. Yeah.
No, you're good.
Okay, it looks like on mine it's cutting in and out. Sorry. I know you from being a moderator there for a long time. So all these videos as they were coming out, I used to read a lot of your threads, and anyway, that was kind of one of the main places I spent time on the internet back sort of maybe 15 years ago.
And it was a different time on the internet.
It was a different time, different place. But there was a local forum, like music forum, Perth, what is it?
Perthbands.com.
Perthbands.com, sorry. And after seeing your video, I put a little thing out because I was working at a reasonably big studio here with a SSL and the whole thing. And I said, look, we got lots of space. Let's just do a meetup day, as Leon said. And if you got cool stuff and cool amps, I just want to hear them, because this guy in LA did this cool video, and it was just so fun to experience the amps in person and play around with them. So yeah, I put the call out, and probably maybe we had about 10 people show up, and still people that we're friends to to this day that we directly met up through this little amp day. And it was awesome. And then I think we did record everything that day, because we put some cabinets in like the live room, brought some heads in, had a little play, and obviously mic'd it up. And then I think one of the comments was like, can we actually just hear the amps like in the room as you would play them? Because me being a recording engineer, it's like, I want to hear what they're going to sound like, when you put a mic on them. That's not everybody's situation. They want to go gig them. So yeah, the next time we did it, I think we probably had maybe 15, 20 people show up, way more gear. We just went into the live room and jammed for like, 6 hours or something. It was awesome. It was so much fun. So
I remember that well because there were like two real standout amps there. One was my Soldano and the other was a Boogie Mark V, which was sort of like someone had come in and there was a recent video you did, James, where it's one of my favorite comments ever. I think it was with the Mark 7 you were talking about, and you're like, you know, it's just an amp. It's not a lifestyle. which is the greatest thing ever said about people who like boogies, because it's so true, you know. And the person who bought this in, it was a lifestyle
crazy
for
over
them.
there, man. They get crazy over there, man, on those forums.
Oh, you didn't put the bass at 1.6 out of 10, you absolute
especially
moron.
if they know you're a Marshall guy. It's like you're a secondary citizen.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was directly inspired by that. And then, you know, I think obviously you've been working and doing stuff, but you've been putting up a lot of YouTube videos recently, and that's kind of where I was like, I think I sent Troy a video. I was like, you know, check out the insane stuff James is doing at the moment, where you're kind of testing amps and cabinets, and it felt like I'd wait like every day for you to put the video up, because it was like a live studio blog basically, where it's like, all right, this is what's happening today, and it was very cathartic. So having spoken about, you know, 14, 15 years ago with stuff, where are you at now with your gear, and how's the process of like, you know, doing YouTube the way YouTube is done and setting up your studio? Because it looks amazing behind you there.
Oh, thanks. Well, I mean, this is a working studio, so it's you know, I've got it a little set up for videos, and I have some nice nice camera gear. My problem so much is that I'm always like, I'm shoehorning it between work. You know, I've got an hour and so I'm doing screen capture, and I shoot that to my laptop, and I just record out of Pro Tools right into like GarageBand, and then I pull it into ScreenFlow. But yeah, I mean, it's you know, I'm a caveman. I'm a Marshall, Mesa, Vox, Fender guy. You know, now I've kind of gotten off Vox, but I'm on Matchless. It's like, you know, it's kind of like, you know, yeah, it's like, you know, Vox with a bow on it or something. Same basic thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and I'm a peanut butter and jelly, you know, I'm a Les Paul Strat, Telecaster, Jazzmaster dude. Yeah, and I mean, I've gotten, yeah, it's kind of still the same. I've been making my own music though. That's what happened. You know, this all started in 2001, the weekend of September 8th and 9th. We recorded the drums and bass at a big studio in LA for my band, and then on that Tuesday was 9/11.
Oh wow.
And my drummer was from Guatemala. We were trying to get him an O visa, and his wife, they had a baby, and she was afraid. So we're like, man, you got to go home, dude. Like, you know, this is not, you know, let's just. But needless to say, it fell apart, and it was making the record was such a bad experience. Well, I wouldn't say it was a bad experience. It was an experience. But let's put it this way: when I got done with the record, I've never listened to it. I hated it. And the funny thing was, one of my clients at the time was Phil X, the guitar player.
Wow.
And
awesome.
I called him and I said, hey, man, I just finished this record and I think it sucks. I'm not sure. I said, you know, can I send it to you and, you know, take a listen? He's like, yeah, send it to me. So then he calls me and he's like, if he's watching this, he'll remember. He said, yeah. He said, it kind of sucks. I'm like, okay. You know, you got to be a big boy in this world, right? So, okay. So I'm like, all right, well, what's up? So his two comments were, one was, he says, your voice is too high. It sounds like Led Zeppelin or like Skid Row. Mm-hmm. He says, you should, like, so the other comment was, you should drop tune your guitar. So I'm like, all right, well, like, what's that about? And he said, well, basically, and at the time I was working with a band, I think it was The Used, it was like a pop punk band, and I was going to the rehearsals, and they were playing bar chords with one finger, and I'm like, what is this? Yeah. Like, you know, I'm not in this world, right? And he said, well, he says, go get a set of 11s, tune your guitar to E flat, and then take the low string and tune it down to C sharp. And I said, yeah. And then you play the bar chord with one finger. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. And he talked about, it changes like the way you move, like your ergonomics is different. And he says what it'll do is it'll lower the keys of these songs and it'll deepen your voice, and you won't sound like, everything won't sound like Skid Row or, Painkiller or whatever. So I did it. I went that day, I got strings, I tuned the guitar up, and at the time, the big record was the first Nickelback record, Silver Side Up, and I was listening to that. And I sat down with that record for about an hour or two, and I learned, the basic, I learned a half a dozen of the songs, and then I wrote my first new song at the time, which was called Where Are You Today? And when I wrote it, I was like, oh my God, I can do this. Like, I can do this, there's hope. And then that was it. And then I went and bought a Digio One. I didn't really. Yep. The only thing I knew about Pro Tools was the last week or two of them working on the record. I sat behind the engineer and I'm watching them because I'm already plotting. I'm like, I need to escape out of this. Yep. Paying. And I was like, it was intimidating, but I thought, I can do this, man. If he can do it, I can do it. And then that was it, and that's where it all started. And
yeah, I think a lot of people had that same thought in 2001. It's and I mean that was a very pivotal time for computers, recording software, all those sort of things. And because I started doing this stuff in 2004, 2005, which being 17 and having no money to even buy a Digio 1 or a Digio 2, that was tough. But these kids now, man, because I teach music recording. And they have no idea how easy and cheap it is. You can use any mic you like. You can buy.
I love it when people complain like they want $22 for a reverb. I'm like, really? You should go buy a Bricasti. Actually, buy 6 of them. Yeah. Put them on all your tracks.
Oh man, like
there was a thing on Marketplace last week. I think Troy sent it to me, and it was sort of like, hey, check this guy out. He's over east. Not anyone we know. He's just someone who's built a home studio, but it's all outboard gear. So it's like, 2 Lexicon 480Ls and like, 4 PCM 70s and 2 Eventides. And it's just this, it's like, yeah, that's just how you did it. It wasn't just like pay $22 for a reverb plugin and then use 70 instances of it. Get your monies back immediately. That's, I mean, your like drop D, drop C sharp experience sounds so similar to my first one, which was, I just never used it. I was aware of it, but, and one day I was, there was whatever was going on happening. I think Troy and I kind of talked about it on a couple of episodes ago. It was like, just being pissed off about something and being like, you know what, I'm going to tune this string down. And I immediately wrote a song and I was like, oh, okay. Cool, there should probably be a melody on this. Let's sit down and hash something out. And it was like that, again, changing the ergonomics, changing the way you look at the instrument, just radically changed everything. And now everything's, tuned down. And
drop C sharp.
I think it's that combination of, I think for someone like yourself, obviously you can, not everyone can do the Skid Row thing or the Painkiller thing and have that high register, but like kind of combining that with the guttural thing you can get out of downtuned bass and guitar, I think is like, that's what I like in modern rock music anyway. And that first Nickelback album, well, it wasn't their first one, the big one, Silver Side Up, that was another one that was back at the time. You'd have ads on TV for albums. Yep. So it'd be, over here it was like, the platinum selling album from Nickelback, Silver Side Up. And you get a little like bit of How You Remind Me or something like that. And then the next thing would be, because you're watching like our version of MTV, you'd get like 3 of the songs are in the top 10. So it'd just be happening. I was 13 when that came out. So it was just like, I wasn't even playing guitar then, but I was aware that it's like, oh, this is what new rock music sounds like. It's very edgy, and like the first Linkin Park album was out at that stage, which was, that like wall of dual rectifier sound that they had going on there, and like Deftones, and it was definitely a new era of like like production? And did you find, so sorry, I'm getting to the point. Did you find that being able to take your work home with like a basic Pro Tools rig, how did it change things apart from just being able to, write and record things for you? What was the sort of like process like? Did you have to learn a bunch of new things? How limiting was the technology, or was it just like, this is awesome, I'm going to roll with it?
The 90s were a blur. I'll leave it at that.
Right.
So, I got my first computer in 99 and I didn't know how to I didn't understand how to turn it on. Like I didn't know what an email was. Like, where people that were already, they were already been doing that for years. I remember there used to be Comp USA, and I took a course on how to use Microsoft Word. Like
Wow.
I didn't know anything. So, but I got ramped up real quick when I got my Pro Tools rig. I was working as an A&R at Universal, and my boss, a lot of things were transpiring, and I bought my first little rig was actually a BR8, a little like
the
Boss,
Boss?
or
The Boss?
whatever, and I got a gig immediately, which was to I did the voiceovers and production music for a documentary about Burning Man,
Okay.
and then I got paid $1,000, and then I went and bought a microphone.
And that was on the BR8.
Yeah, that was a BR8, right? So, and it got distributed. I mean, I got to watch it on TV. It was cool, but it was just a series of evolution. But when I guess this was around 2002, right when I got the Pro Tools rig, right when the record was finally finished. It was a disaster. Phil told me, hey, try this. I got the Pro Tools rig. I was training a kid. I was a voice, I'm still a voice coach. I was teaching voice, and I went to the studio with this kid. I went to meet him at the studio to help him track vocals on his record, and there was a guy there producing his record, and I was watching him, and I was like, oh my God, like this guy was like, it was like watching Picasso, man. I mean, and the thing is I was very kind of self-contained, arrogant person. Like I'm the genius around. Like I never wanted anybody to help me. I didn't want to hear your input. I didn't care what you thought. Like I was very self-contained. I got the rig, and I had my first band came in, the punk band, and the recording was so bad. You ever do something that's so bad that you don't even know what's wrong with it?
Yep.
It's like beyond. I can't even put my finger on it. It's just bad.
First 10 years of my career.
And me too.
First
and I
35
called him.
years of my life.
His name is Greg, and I said, Greg, hey, so I got this band over here, and I just recorded them, and it's just the worst thing I've ever heard. And he came over, and he never left. He worked with me for like 10 years, but
Wow.
And he was into like the Linkin Park, Sugar Ray, Avril Lavigne, Incubus. We used to call it getting jiggy with it, wiki, like blending hip hop with metal, with pop, with this indie. Like he was into like Coldplay. He was into everything. He was into was different than what I was into, but it changed my life. At first, it was intimidating, but then it was like, okay, again, I can do this. Like if he can do it, I can do it.
It was far more antagonistic. Like if you liked what you liked, there was a lot more like, no, I'm a rock guy, fuck nu metal, or like the opposite. Nowadays it's a lot more like, hey, everything's good and everybody collaborates with everybody. Did you find that was a bit of a wall to break down for you? Like once you kind of got over the newness of something, or that it really, really, like that being open to new things kind of busted a lot of things down for you, especially being so experienced as a touring muso and having all these other experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been pretty flexible. I would say I'm a deep well of music, a very deep well of music. Not just listening, but I can play everything. I can play. I can sit into almost any band and be cool to one degree or another. So like I said, when I was a kid, and if you were a rocker, you were listening to Foghat and Led Zeppelin, and that was it. Everything else was like pussy music. But I was never like that. Like I was listening to,
Yeah.
Earth, Wind, and Fire was like my favorite, and Steely Dan. These were my favorite bands. You know what I mean? I grew up.
I don't trust anyone who doesn't like Steely Dan, put it that way.
I heard somebody do the guitar solo from Home Again the other day on a video. It was so beautiful, man. But yeah, but the thing too is that when I was a kid, I got a job at a music store, and this was in Fort Lauderdale in like, I guess, the late 70s, early 80s. I was about 14, and all the guys there were 30s, 40s, 50s, and I grew up with Jocko. Like, I grew up in that environment, like right near University of Miami. Like, some of the best musicians on the planet were in Fort Lauderdale in the 70s and 80s. It was the mecca for work because it was the mecca of vacationing. So it was a million bar bands. It was like Vegas back in the, So I was influenced by like just monsters as a child. And, I was thrown right in. When I was 14, I got a phone call from somebody come in the shop, and they're like, "Hey, can you play tonight? It's a country, we're a country band." And I was like, "Okay." And I called my guitar teacher, and I said, "There's this country band. I don't even listen to country. What do I do?" He says, "Oh, it's really easy. In the pentatonic scale, everything you're going to play, just move everything back 3 frets." And he says, "Play backwards." He said, "Play backwards." And I thought, you know how much money I've made from that sentence? He says, "Move everything back 3 frets and play backwards." I still do that.
I taught a kid that last night.
That's the stuff, though.
I still do that.
Yep.
They're the
play backwards.
How many videos do you see online of like, it's someone looking super serious with a fancy guitar? It's like the one thing you need to know to master the guitar. And it's some bullshit like 7th mode of the melodic minor scale. And you're like, no. It's definitely not that, bro. It's play backwards.
I'll tell you, I am getting blasted with those things, man. And I don't know if it's just, the algorithm, but it's like everybody's trying to teach me the Cage system, and these guys look like nerds. Like, dude, yeah. I don't know what you're thinking with the Cage system, but, I don't know. I'm a grown man, dude. I don't even fucking think like that anymore.
Just play guitar, man. Just play guitar. It's not that hard. Like,
yeah, man. Keep
it's
it
rock
simple,
music.
man.
It doesn't have to be hard. It's just sort of like, all
right.
Don't overthink
exactly.
it. It's like gear as well. Like, you go on this, there's always, I call it going into orbit. You're like, you've got a Marshall, you're playing it, you're happy, and you're like, oh, I wonder if you change this. And the next thing you're on this like 17-channel switching system with a rack, and you're like, yeah, this is really, really good. And then you play a Marshall again, you're like, I'm a moron. I should have just done this the whole time.
It happens to me.
What's
weekly,
wrong with
man?
me?
Maybe monthly, not weekly, but geez. Go on, sorry.
I have a theory that Kirk Hammett's playing got worse when he started taking lessons from Satriani. I'm convinced of it. Listen to Ride the Lightning. That's the best playing Kirk Hammett's ever done, in my opinion.
I'm gonna chalk something up to Joe and Steve, and I love Joe and Steve, and they're amazing. But the way guitar players misunderstand modes is all because of Joe Satriani writing columns in the 80s that like, Lydian's easy. It's just the same thing as C major, but starting on F. So you literally play the same thing. There was very rarely any discussion about harmony. It's like, oh, you just do the same thing, but down here, bro, and you do like really, really fast legato. This is a massive, I'm misrepresenting this, but I still, everybody I teach who is like an intermediate to advanced player doesn't get modes, and you're like, oh, okay, so do this instead of thinking about the scale. Like, play A minor and F and do the pentatonic scale over it, but then play A minor and D and do the pentatonic scale over it. And they kind of sound a bit different, don't they? What's with that? And then you have that like, oh, it's not just a bunch of patterns. But yeah, I would not disagree with you there, where sometimes that like, I think with learning things, you have to go all the way down the rabbit hole, not halfway, because then you get stuck in no man's land where it's like you second guess what you're good at instinctually. It's the same thing with like singers. Like speaking of Ryan, the singer for Ragdoll, I think he's just kind of come to the conclusion that like if you ask him what he does, he's like, I don't know, but I just remember being at a rehearsal and someone sucked at singing. So I was like, oh, I'll give AC/DC a go. And everybody loved it. And then anytime he thinks about it, he's like, yeah, I don't know. I get in my own head. And anytime he's just like, oh, I'm just going to have a good night's sleep and like have some food, then he'll just, tear the paint off the walls with the way he sings. So some people are like that. They're just instinctual animals, and other people are just kind of, like us, we're nerds.
Yep. I've probably ruined him in the studio a few times, making him think about stuff too much. But I've done that with a lot of people, and it's really hard. James, that's probably a discussion for another time. I'd like to actually talk to you about that, is coaching when you're, tracking vocals with someone.
No, I'm interested. Ask this question.
I want to talk about
not gear related, but it's knowledge, and I feel like there's some knowledge which can be passed on here.
Oh, I'll ask you, if it's okay, I'll ask you a quick
forever.
question, because when I track singers sometimes, I have certain ways that I get performances out of people, and obviously identifying positive, negative things about it. But I'm really conscious about over complicating technique things, and also just not even over complicating technique things, discussing technique at all if someone's not prepared to do it at the time. I find like if I have like 2 hours to track vocals with someone, or an hour to track vocals, if I'm trying to get them to do scales and they've never done that before and they've never experienced the sensation of it, and it kind of almost derails a session. Whereas as like what Leon's saying, just get them to sing the way they sing. And maybe it's I don't really have a question there, but maybe it's do you find danger in trying to overcomplicate the technique when you're trying to actually record someone? So thinking about
that's a good question.
Yeah, maybe that's the way I can say it. Does that make sense? Does it make sense? Maybe it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you guys got to keep it primitive. You just got to keep it easy. I mean, singing's primitive. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the the classical people say it's the highest form of art because it's the first thing we did. When you came out of the mother's chute, you were like, oh, you're already hitting that high C. So it's singing is is a series of letting go. It's not so much knowledge, it's letting go. So, you don't want to bombard them. I wouldn't. In the studio, you got to be very careful. And for me, too, being a coach, and like if people pull me in, a lot of times I'm like, well, listen, just don't go into detail about who I am and what I do. Because a lot of times I walk in the studio and people are already on guard.
Right.
They're like, oh God, Lugo's here. Like, he's going to hate me. Or like, he's going to think I suck or whatever, So you just got to like kind of neutralize it, little self-deprecating humor.
Yeah.
One thing my buddy Brian always used to say, never tell them they're flat. Always say, it feels under.
Yeah.
You just got to be careful,
Watch language,
save face, help let people save face. Because, singers are touchy creatures, man. It's a touchy creature world, so.
I think because it is so primitive as well, it's sort of, especially for a lot of singers where they get identified young. They're kind of like, they're the closest thing with musicians. Musicians in a lot of ways are the opposite of elite athletes, but singers are the closest thing, because it's probably a thing they were identified as being good at earlier in their life, and that's been cultivated. Whereas with guitar players, normally it's like, I'm not good at anything else. What's like some way to like gain prestige?
No, get chicks. That's the only reason we do it, right?
Yeah,
I thought it was about getting girls.
Yeah.
Well, my physical prowess is so lacking that I need some other way to get the girls. So I'll learn the intro to Enter Sandman or Sweet Child of Mine.
That'll
or
get them.
And then
they'll love that.
They'll love that, mate. As we're just walking examples of that, aren't we, Troy?
Mate. Well, hey, 2 kids later, it's okay. It did work. Worked once.
He's hung like a hamster. So going back to Australia. All right, so I spent a month there with that band, Dead City Ruins, at Pony.
Yep.
You know what I learned?
So there we go. This is the connection. I've seen them a bunch of times, and we've never played with them, but when we toured Europe, we played like all the same places they had played about a month later. So small world.
Yeah. So I learned. So here's what I learned about people in Australia. One, boy, you guys curse a lot.
Oh yeah.
We keep it way down here.
You throw the C word, which in America is like, whoa. But also, you know what I found? You know what I started eating over there? They called it Pammies. The chicken parm with the French fries. Pammies, yeah.
All right, so
on that,
Jimmy, if you Depending on geographically where you are. 'Cause where we are, it's a palmy with a Y on the end.
Oh, okay.
Over there,
Okay.
it can be a palm with an A on the end.
Palma,
Or
yeah.
Yeah, what's the other one
yeah.
that it can be palmy?
Palmo.
Palmo, yeah. Which,
Palmo is like, don't
Yeah.
say that.
yeah, just don't. But we're palmy people over here. But yeah, chicken palms, however you want to say it. When you're in a pub, that's what you get.
And we were, every night we were hanging out at the Cherry Bar.
Okay, so what
the
year
owner,
was this?
James, this was probably 2012.
Okay, so Cherry
Yeah.
Bar is now gone. I was in Melbourne like 9 or 10 days ago, and they were like, we're closing, we're done, and we played a show there as part of their they invited a bunch of bands who
Really?
had played there, and it was going to be all over. So we actually recorded the show, and it's up as a live album. It was sort of doing this thing, but it just relocated, and we went there. We were like, oh, let's check out the new Cherry Bar, and it sucks. It was not the same. You can't move a place like that because it was down that alleyway, and it was the closest thing we had to like a proper American style dive bar. It used to be such a great place to play. Like that was we played there a bunch of times, and no matter what, it was just pumping. You didn't need many people in there for it to have a vibe. And James Young is definitely someone who's sort of outspoken about a lot of things here, which a lot of venue owners tend not to touch.
Yeah, I wish I got a chance to go there. I think Frankie's in Sydney is the same. Similar
Which
sort of
is
vibe.
also closed now.
Also closed. I went there with Cam.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
That was cool.
So the two good venues Australia had now gone.
Gone. So James, I was going to ask you because I wouldn't mind having a quick chat about some of your gear and your setup, but the videos from back in the day, you sort of mentioned buying the SSL. So I obviously do not see an SSL behind you. So when did you get rid of that, and why did you get rid of that? I'm just curious.
No, man, it was weird. I was, when we left LA, I bought it in LA, and then I left LA. I moved to North Carolina, started having kids, and my whole life just was overblown, and I just wanted a simpler life. I mean, at one point I had everything, man. I had racks of Pultex, I had an SSL, I had a Studer tape machine, I had all the hardware, I had lexicons and eventides, and I at one point I had the golden 4 or 5 vocal mics. I mean, it was like 50 grand in mics. I had a 47, a 67, a 251, I had a C800, and a pair of vintage U87s. And, I don't know. I started having this fear of impending doom. It's like, man, what happens if one day people don't call for work anymore? I don't know. I was just this is too much, man. Just keep it simple. And I mean, my setup is still kind of mental case, but not like it was then.
Yeah.
But your setup for a working studio is more streamlined than most hobbyists I know nowadays. You go on Facebook groups and forums, and it's and hey, I'm not dissing that at all. If that's something you do to unwind, guitar is an amazing hobby as well, and amps and gear are cool. There's way worse things you can spend your money on, but there's definitely a point, not just of diminishing returns, but where the returns actually go backwards when you have too much stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, yeah. I mean, it can slow the process down. And at one point I had a wall. At one point I had 15 amps. But even when I was here, at one point I had 10 amps, and I had an Axe Effects, and I had a Kemper, and it was just oh my God, man, just let it go, man. You know what I mean? Just too much. Now I've got 4 amps. That's a 77 stock 50-watt JMP.
I also have a 77
master volume.
Actually.
Yeah, there's awesome. your Cherry Bar amp. That's AC/DC Def Leppard.
Yep.
Then that's a Mark Cameron Ocean modded 800. That's a new multi-watt, dual rec, and that's a matchless HC30. That's and then I have an FM9 that I use because I play around town with it live, and then it's sitting up here, but I use it in the studio.
Yep. And what have you got in the way of cabinets? Because I think I watched your I watched your video going through the studio in your live room. So I think that's where
loved that video, man.
Yeah, that's where the guitars are, right? Like sort of behind the amp
Yeah,
rack.
yeah.
So you've got 4 cabs in there, is that right?
I'll walk you in there. Let's see if we can walk in there.
Let's do it.
I love a walking tour.
Yeah.
For anybody who's solely listening to the podcast, come to
here's
YouTube and subscribe.
Yes.
Here's the amps. Here's the pedal board.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you have on the board? What have you set on? Because I also really liked your video when you were kind of shooting out the pedals.
I just went back to the old Strymon. I've got an L cap also.
Nice.
And then I've got, an 808. The Mythos Meunier is killer.
Is that like a clone style thing?
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then I have the EQ, and I just got this. This is the Sir Woodshed, the Andy Wood compressor.
Yep.
Oh man, that thing is awesome. And then here's the desk, which I've got like the reactive load and the radial amp splitter, and I don't have the big amp splitter setup. Like this is the back of my amps. I'm like analog, old school.
Yep.
And then I've got Adams and all this, and then this is my main rack.
Oh yeah,
which is
nice.
A couple of Burrows. That's a B32 mixer, a Burrow B2, GML 8200, the classic. I got a pair of distressors, a Sans amp, an Avocet, and then you come in here and it's here's the guitars. And it's really a peanut butter and jelly. I mean, honestly, I could do 90% of my work with a Strat and a Les Paul.
Yep.
I've got, Tellys and a Jazzmaster, a couple of Les Pauls, different tunings, different strings.
Are you allowed to take residence in Nashville if you don't own a telly?
No, they kick you out.
I thought so, yeah.
They send you to Perth. and here's the cab. So that's a Mesa cab with an X pattern of vintage 30s and greenbacks.
Yep.
Awesome.
And I've got mics on both of them, and I blend it. And then this is an old vintage matchless cab with greenback and H30. And I did the old Zach Wish thing with the 102 and the 57, and yeah, that's it, man. And
That's awesome.
and I got a new cabinet,
Yeah.
so everything's kind of put away.
Oh, I love it. I love a new cabinet. I love storage.
Yeah.
Organization.
Can I show you something really quick? Just because this is kind of funny, but if I go to my right over here, you may see some similarities in my rack because I have a summing mixer at the top. I have a pair of distressors.
Oh, okay.
And I have an Avid interface and the patch bays as well in this basically the same rack that you have. So I thought that was.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was quite funny.
Yeah.
So,
Now let me ask you on that one: does the lid come off and become a table?
No, not on that one.
Look at this.
I have a set of drawers where the front of the rack comes off.
That's
and
cool. That's cool.
I have the same rack, James.
Yeah, it comes off, and then like here's my piano. So this is where I teach all day.
Gotcha. That's awesome.
I got to teach voice so I can pay for all this equipment.
I feel you. I think I'm going to start teaching guitar so I can start paying for some equipment as well. So,
Telling you.
it's you got to, man. It's one of those things. Like as we said, it's part of it is the job. Like you need the tools to do the job. Part of it is just you need to enjoy your life. And unfortunately for all of us, guitars and pedals and amps, they are very fun. It's hard to know where the line is, where it's as long as you can pay your bills, right? Then it's probably better than drinking and carrying on and doing drugs and whatnot. Or maybe not. I don't know. I don't do those things. I just buy guitars and amps. That's my vice. But that's really cool, man, to see that set up. So there's so many similarities, same racks. I used to have a Polytune actually cable tied to my setup before I got a rack tuner, so it's really funny.
That's crazy.
Yep. It must be parallel thinking or something like that.
Yeah.
Convergent evolution.
Are those the you've got the A77 Adams? Is that the ones you've got behind you?
Yeah. I got those last year. I was a Genelec man. I mean, I had the quintessential LA studio. I had a pair of Genelecs and a pair of NS10s for about 20 years.
Yep.
And I just wanted something, I don't know, I just grew tired of I wanted something more, I like it to be fun to play guitar and track guitars and track music. Not that mixing's not important, but I don't know. I can mix anywhere. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You get used to whatever. But I don't like I track. I'm better now, but I track pretty loud. I mean, if I'm playing rhythm, it's bumping. My old assistant used to have to step back, and he's like, "How can you handle that?"
Yep.
And I'm like, "Huh? What?" With the click track, bam, 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 bam.
My least favorite sound in the world. Hey, how do you find? So I used Adam A7s for a long time, of which Leon also has a pair of those in his studio. I find guitars through them sound really, really nice. It's I don't know for whatever reason, maybe it's the ribbon tweeter, but I really enjoy listening to and tracking guitars with them and mixing guitars on them. I have Focal Twin 6BEs, and I love listening to music on them and I love mixing on them, but I find guitars on them kind of unpleasant, which is really weird considering how much guitars I use.
I had those for about a year or two. I didn't like playing with those. They sounded strange.
Yeah.
Like Adams sound more normal to me. I mean, I had the big ones, the S3X,
yep.
the horizontal ones. They're like $8,000 a pair.
Yep.
I had those for years in LA. And then when I sold out of one studio and then just consolidated and went into my own thing, I got a pair of those Focals. Mm-hmm. And that they didn't really jive for me. But that's, it's...
They took a while.
People using any...
Yeah.
I said it's that beryllium tweeter in those. Is that what it is?
That might be what it is. But I've always... I wouldn't say I've struggled with it, but I found it just sounded really natural through the Adams. Like listening to music and tracking guitars. And I've had a few instances with these ones where I guess like with NS10s, I know there's a thing where it's like if they sound kind of crappy in that high and that mid range, that's almost what you want. It almost means you have a good guitar sound, so you can sort of work to that. I don't really get the same experience with these speakers, but I just love listening to music on them, and I do really like mixing on them. I had a sub connected for a while. And I found actually turning the sub off has made these speakers sound way, way better and easy to work on. So possibly, possibly just 5 years of running with a sub was a mistake, but I guess we'll wait another 5 years and find that out.
And find out you're wrong again.
I'm always wrong. I'm always, always an experimentation. So,
hey, does anybody need the mid-range mixed? I'm the mid-range guy.
It's all in the mids, man.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I'm opening a studio. It's called No Booty Recording.
Oh man, this already has been the funniest podcast we've ever done. So thank you for that, James. You mentioned recording your own music. What are you working on with your own stuff at the moment? And what are you pumped about?
Man, I just did my new song, but baritones. I bought one of those Gretsch baritones, and I picked up an ESP Viper with like EMG 81s, like crazy, and it came out so good. And it, I got this idea about 2 years ago that I wanted to just start doing this licensing thing and get back into just doing. I used to do film and television music. I wanted to do it again, and it's like 2-minute instrumental stuff, and you kind of get a theme and I immediately got like a deal with a company, and then I was in that world, and then I'm trying to make everybody happy, and then the company got bought out by Warner Brothers, and they paid me, but I don't ever know really what came of everything. It just kind of went wherever it went, into the ether. But and I'll probably see it on a TV show and realize I'm going to get paid. That's happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But anyway, where was I? I digress.
Baritones and EMGs.
So I did a song. All right, I'm going to say it. I did a song for WB, and it was for a TV show, and they passed on it.
All right.
And two years later, that huge vampire TV show
Vampire Diaries?
I think it was Vampire Diaries.
Right.
And it was like the opening scene where the main character is being introduced. Mm-hmm. They played my song, and it was what they wanted was they wanted an AC/DC, sound alike. They wanted me to sing like Brian Johnson.
Oh yeah.
And when I got done with it, it actually sounded like Bon Scott, which was really weird. And a part of me liked it. It was cool, but part of me was like, well, yeah, it's like we were going for Back in Black and we got a whole lot of Rosie. But the song was called Soul Sucker. Anyway, it made it onto the show.
Yep.
And if you know anything about licensing, that's prime real estate. There's three main areas: the intro, out credits, and the moment when the main character is introduced for the first time. That's when you want to get. That's when the payday is. But they didn't pay me anyway. So I got wrapped up in that world, and then it took all the fun out of it. Because now I'm trying to make everybody happy, and they want me to do Nickelback beer music. Like, hey, gone around and on, hey, So I did all these cues, and it came out cool. But I lost my momentum. The first cue that I made that the company heard, they loved it. And they said, this is great. We don't want this. We want that. Do this. So that first song, and the first song was inspired by, I don't know if you guys ever saw the YouTube video that Pete Thorne did on the Ox.
I don't remember.
But the song he wrote for the UAR, that song when I bought an Ox and I'm watching the video and I'm like, oh. And then it just totally like blew my mind. I'm like, this is what I want to do. So I wrote this song kind of inspired by the Pete Thorne thing. And then, I got into this, hey, beer, Nickelback thing. And then it came all the way back around and I just started writing again, like about 2 months ago. And I've got a couple songs done and, I'm just doing whatever. And it's not with no... this is where my head's been at, doing this for a living your whole life. It's a service industry. Mm-hmm. You're a waiter. You're a waiter with a trackball. And, I just want to make some music and not have to make anybody happy. Mm-hmm. Like just make music for fun and for myself. And I'm enjoying it and people are digging it. I mean, it sounds cool. So, and, if things come about and, I've got a guy that's talking about wanting to do, licensing stuff, a couple people, and I'll do it. But it's I don't want to lose myself with work again. The whole thing of this, and this is like the takeaway for anybody that's watching this, that does this. When 9/11 hit and my record came out and it was horrible, and then, Phil said, do this, and I did that, and then I got a Pro Tools rig. I wanted to start making my music, but all of a sudden, I started making money. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, this is cool, man. And you know who got bumped? Me. I got bumped out of my own studio more than anybody ever. Nobody ever gets bumped here because I don't overbook, but, it's a big LA thing. The Fleetwood Mac called, you're bumped.
Yep.
But the person that got bumped out of this studio was me up until about 3 or 4 months ago. And I just said, I just have to make a stance. I have to make a stance and just start making a point of working on music. And I don't even know what I want to do. I didn't have a big vision as far as the only vision was that I just didn't want to have to make other people happy. I just wanted to play my music and whatever was going to come of it was going to come of it.
Like when you hear about, Michelin star chefs and then they just open up a taco stand, and you're like, dude, you're like a Michelin star chef. What are you doing? He's like, but I discovered I just really, really love making tacos. And if no one comes, whatever, I'm having a great time doing what I love. And most of the time, because they've been a Michelin chef, the tacos are going to be pretty good. People are going to be into it. So that's that's something I found doing, falling into doing YouTube gear demos where it's like you hear yourself play like an A, G, and a D chord for 8 hours a day. The last thing you want to do is sit down and try to come up with something because you've already played every single permutation of every chord the whole day. And you're like, yeah, I just need to I need to play some like Nintendo or something and just forget about it, or I need to I just need to plug a reverb pedal in with a mix at 98%. So,
and Leon, having heard you play a GC and a D chord for 8 hours as I'm mixing your music, I also get very sick and tired, and last thing I want to do is play guitar when I'm at the end of a mix. So it's
the only person more sick and tired of my playing than me is you. So that's understandable, because you probably have to put up with the end result with it. But it's a really good piece of advice, and I know with a lot of my students who really, really like guitar, they're sort of like, so now all I want to do is do guitar. It's like, man, you're 20, you're a kid, do it. But do a bunch of other stuff as well. Don't get too caught up in what you see online, because I guarantee all those other people have other things going on. So just, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Have fun with it. You know, if you're having fun with it, I kind of learned that the hard way as well. You know, like you get to that point where it's like, this is what I've always wanted to do. I'm in a band and I'm touring. And the last thing I wanted to do was practice guitar or do anything like that. I probably played the least amount of guitar. And you have that realization of like, well, if I'm going to do this, maybe the thing that got me into it was that it was fun and exciting. So focus on that rather than everything else. And if you can keep doing it, then I guess that's okay. It's like a mindset thing, right? You can get too caught up in your own head with it.
And keeping it a priority.
Yes.
You know, I mean, it's like, yeah, because, it's easy to just be like, work, I got kids, I got this, I got that, and Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts and baseball practice, and I coach Little League, and yeah, I kind of wanted to be that guy too. It's weird, like that's a part of why I wanted to leave LA, was that I didn't want to, because in LA, in the prime of my career in the 2000s, I mean, I was working 80 hours a week. I mean, I was working morning, noon, and night, and driving BMWs and living in Sherman Oaks and buying SSLs and touring and traveling and I was extravagant, like badly extravagant, not in a good way, but that was a part of going back to this whole getting rid of the SSL. It was like I knew. Like, I'm like, I have to get right sized here. I got to come back to reality.
I like that saying, get right sized.
Yeah.
That's gonna join the lexicon along with it's an amp, not a lifestyle.
Well, for years in my Hollywood studio, below me, I was 7th floor, 6th floor, right below me was Glenn Ballard, the guy that produced Jagged Little Pill.
Yeah.
He was Quincy's assistant on Thriller, and massive. And we had parking spots right next to each other. And I was driving like a pickup truck or whatever I was driving, and he had a black on black BMW. Mm-hmm. Guess who bought a black on black BMW? Me. And, because I associated success with that. Like there was some sort of a status with it.
Yep.
Get an SSL, get the house in Sherman Oaks, just have the kind of studio when people walk in, literally their jaws would drop. Like my old studio, people would walk in there and be like, what? Like, you own this? Like, this crazy tape machines, nutso stuff.
I've done...
If you could...
I was going to say...
you go, Troy.
Oh, yeah. I've sort of been similar with that, because, I mean, I used to have 3 racks of, like the one you saw, just filled with compressors and reverbs and bits and pieces. And I mean, I've got all the amps because that's just fun for me. That's toys. But I wanted to have that same sort of thing, because it's almost like, I guess the studio speaks for what the project will sound like, because he must be good because he's got all this sort of stuff. And then you kind of just realize, man, it's meaningless. Like sometimes just having some space and some clarity and just do the job and enjoy your life, that becomes a bit more priority. So I've been trying to scale myself down a little bit, similar to you, I guess. Not with getting rid of the amps, because that's fun time, that's playtime. But some of the gear, it's like, man, why have I got a bunch of 1176s and 500 series bits and pieces and all this outboard reverb? I never use it. It's there to please one person, which I do a lot more sessions in a different studio downstairs now, so it's not like I've got lots of foot traffic through here anyway, just for my own ego. So yeah, I think it can get a bit out of hand sometimes. It's good to just just chill it out. So yeah, Liam, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was going to say, before we finish up, you made some great points there, James. If you could do the, time travel and give yourself some advice experiment, you could go back and, give your 20 or 30-year-old self some advice with all of this madness with gear and music and, the biz, being a waiter on call, essentially. What would you tell yourself? Has much changed for you, or has a lot changed?
Yeah, I mean, I don't regret anything. The path, and going back to this, moderating gear sluts for somebody that already has mental illnesses with this stuff is like fanning the fire, right?
Are you still doing that? Are you still doing that?
Yeah. I've been there, I think, 18 years, 19
Wow.
years. No. 20, probably close to 20 now, like 2002, 2003.
I'll just say quickly before you continue, like I had to stop going on that website because it was too much. Like for exactly what you said, like for having a mental illness associated with this, it was really bad, and I had to make a conscious effort to say no more gear space, no more or gear slots, whatever you want to say.
Well, so I start the journey, right? And I'm crazy. I'm buying and selling gear for 20 years, like all this different gear and this and that, and reading posts and buy this and try that. And when it was all said and done, you know what I have? Distressors, Need 1073s, Les Pauls, and Marshalls. I could have just quit. I could have just bought that stuff the first day, because that's what everybody was saying was cool.
Yeah.
And not gone through, but I had to go buy all the boutique stuff and all of this and the that and the 9 things of this and it all came back. It's funny. I just sold my 1176 last year. I just didn't use it anymore.
I've stopped using mine.
I'd had it about.
Yeah, I've stopped using mine too. I'm just using Distressors for everything at the moment. It's weird.
Yeah, and I thought, man, isn't that funny that after all of that, it came back to, and guitar. To me, guitar is the same way. It's like, well, and if you guys watch any new videos, I was going with the Eventides and all this and all. I ended up just pulling it all and just getting the Strymon Trio. That will never go out of style for a session guitar player. I mean, every single session guitar player in Nashville has a Mobius, a Timeline, and a Big Sky. End of story. And one may not have this or that, but I mean, everybody's got the Mobius. And
it's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Yeah, like what, the Earthquaker devices, it's the 77-bit. Who cares? The guitar's taking up this much room. It's about the damn singer anyway.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, nobody wants to hear the guitar overpowering the record. You hear a lot of demos and you're like, that's really cool. But boy, if you put that in a record, the record label would literally fire you. You would be fired because it's too big.
Yep.
It's too big. It's got too much character. It's too big and too much character.
As we would say here, it's too bunter.
It's rookie stuff, because if you don't know and you think, this and that, squeeze that into a real record, and it's tough, unless the record's just your thing and it's like your guitar and somebody that can scream over the top of you. But if it's like mainstream commercial production, I mean, you guys hear the radio. There's barely any guitar in half the dang songs anyway.
I think pop music has basically become 2.5-minute trailers. Like, what's that Imagine Dragons song that it's always, you're doing a gig in a beer garden here and the 8-year-olds come over and they're like, I think it's Thunder or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
It's literally just a melody. It sounds like they've written it from the perspective of, let's make sure this gets licensed because that's where the money is. But all the rest of the production is like cool sounds. There's no guitar on it, but it's like every verse you listen to, you're like, it's kind of interesting to listen to because there's just cool noises everywhere and like a jingle. Where are you going to put electric guitar in that? I mean, you don't need to. You've already got cool sounds.
Yeah. I mean, you just gotta, so yeah, I guess, when it was all said and done, it's kind of just come back to Les Pauls and Strats and Marshalls and Maces and, Voxes and, a GE7. I mean, that's the Swiss Army knife for the session guitar player. I got that little El Cap is in line, not in the loop for.
Cool.
I really like that for tape delay. And that's it. And I've got, my Mesa cab has BAE 1073s on it.
Yep.
And my Matchless has API 512s.
Yep.
That's it. All the experiment in me just landed me right back to where I was from the beginning, and then, but I had to go through it.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because you can't tell me anything. I have to experience it. That's just the way I'm built.
Yep.
My dad, that was one of my dad's like bane of his existence was that he always felt like, why don't you learn from my experience? And, when you're 14 and, he's like, he's telling you, whatever, don't do
James,
this,
Put 1073s on the guitars, do it.
James.
Shut up, Dad.
Get a ribbon mic, get a 57, get nice cables and call it a day and try to play in tune. But I had to go out there and I had to wreck every, I had to do just whatever I had to do. So little by little, though, I've gotten a little more relaxed and not so, you guys, if you've been watching the new videos, I've been retooling this, but it's really to make it streamlined, simplified. At one point I had like 4 cabinets in there. You know what it's like, 4 cabinets in that room?
I have 7 cabinets in my room. It's not that much bigger than yours, so I know what it's like.
Well, it's tough, and because I want the guitars out. I'd rather have the guitars than the cabinets. I mean, a couple cabs is cool, but
yeah, it does.
I'm a big fan of having the guitars out, as you can see, because you're more likely to pick them up. I always remember my dad saying that, is like, don't keep your guitars in cases because then you'll never play them. So have them out. Yeah. That way, every time you walk past it, that small probability that you're going to want to pick it up, it's the law of large numbers. You're going to pick the guitar up and then, if you want to make music, you got to like pick up an instrument first or do something.
I've heard a similar thing with outboard gear, like studio gear. If you have one of those desks that has everything like mounted, you might be more inclined to use it. But then where are you going to put your coffee? So
you got to put it on the piano.
Oh yeah, that's right. I actually I've told this to a lot of people, a lot of my students, but I'll say this like very publicly as well. I spilled a whole cup of tea on the SSL that I used to work on.
Oh yeah. Now I'm sick. Now I wish I wasn't here.
Yeah, it was. Well, the thing was, it was really funny. It was on the faders. It was a 64 channel console, and the last 8 faders were never ever used. And I had a whole cup of tea on the faders because that's what I used to do. Because I was being a big dog basically, and I was mid-20s. So the cup of tea fell over, milk and everything, and nothing happened. The session continued on. The clients saw and knew exactly what had happened, and I mopped it up as best as I could. The session continued. No one said a word. And 6 months later, the owner of the studio said, "Oh, I was cleaning out the studio, the console, and I went to this fader bank, and there was all this really weird white stuff in there." And I said to him, "Oh, that's weird. I wonder what that could be." And it was never spoken of again. So I completely got away with it. That console was sold recently, and I don't know if the new owner knows that there was a whole cup of tea spilt in it. But
let's just chalk that white stuff up to being the other white stuff
rock
that's
and roll.
often on a desk at a studio, right? James, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we do this? This has been amazing. Obviously, being a long time admirer of what you do, it's been great to have you on the podcast, and feels like just hanging out with an old mate. So I hope we can do this in person one day. But is there anything else that any parting words?
Man, it's when you asked if I would do this, I was like, yeah. I mean, you're my YouTube guy, man. I mean, you're a part of why I have Fractal.
Well,
You know?
there you go. I feel
That-
like now
some of
after
those-
hearing you talk, I need to hit you up for some singing lessons as well, because that's it's just one of those things that, you know, you talk about. Some of the things that you said were like, yeah, okay, cool. I know that this guy gets it, but that'd be very interesting. So we might have to talk a little bit more.
Yeah, you know, if you're a rocker, I mean, that's obviously, you know, where my roots are. But it's good to be here, and it's really, yeah, I mean, I really, yeah, you've been a huge influence, and now I know Troy, so it's like a big party.
Yeah, man.
The circle is complete, as we like to say. Well, ladies and gentlemen,
Yeah.
James Lugo, thank you so much. Where can people find you on the internet, James?
Well, I have a YouTube. I think it's youtube.com/James Lugo, or you can go to jameslugomusic.com. That's the website. And then I think there's Facebook/James Lugo Music. Not the biggest Instagrammer, but that's also /James Lugo. Just, you know, basically my name will get you wherever you need to get going.
Yep. That's the one.
Alrighty. Well, that was a fantastic podcast. Thank you to everybody who has subscribed and continues to tune in. Make sure you go and check out James and all of his wonderful noises that he makes online with the guitar and the voice and everything else. And exactly. And that's the Gear Podcast for this week. Thank you, everybody. Take it easy.
Peace out, everyone. Bye.